Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill today, where he addressed what's happening in Los Angeles during a House Appropriations hearing.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country.
Elizabeth Goitein is the Senior Director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law. She is an expert on presidential emergency powers and government surveillance and secrecy, and she joins us now from Washington. Elizabeth, good to see you. This isn't the first time a president has called in the National Guard without a request from the state, but what sort of rights does Mr. Trump have to make this move?
It's true, this isn't the first time, but the last time that it happened was in 1965. So it's been almost 60 years since the president deployed federal troops to a state without a request from that state. Now, ordinarily, the president cannot use federal troops to quell civil unrest under something called the Posse Comitatus Act. But Congress has legislated some exceptions to that. And one of those exceptions is the Insurrection Act. That is the law that previous presidents have relied on when they've deployed federal troops. Trump is not relying on that law. He's invoking other authorities in a novel way that really have not been used for the purpose he's using them. And there are a lot of legal questions around whether troops are authorized to be doing what they're doing right now in Los Angeles. But beyond that, it is exceedingly rare in this country for troops to be deployed to conduct these kinds of civil unrest operations, because that is a function that it is a responsibility of state and local law enforcement under our Constitution. It is only in the most extreme cases where state and local law enforcement are completely overwhelmed. And when they come and they ask the government for help in this sort of situation, that the federal military should be involved, and that is not the situation we have here.
Yeah, it's also important to note that historical context, the last time that this happened was under Lyndon B. Johnson. The federal troops were sent in to protect civil rights activists and students trying to go to school. So how much more complicated could things get if the Marines and National Guard members are given policing powers?
That is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. And what that law does is it prohibits federal armed forces from participating directly in core law enforcement activities, such as arrests, searches, and seizures, unless Congress or the Constitution expressly authorizes them to do that. And the president has cited no express authority, legal authority for the Marines to conduct arrests, searches, or seizures. So we are in very, very problematic territory, both legally and in terms of what this means. If the president is exceeding the constraints imposed by law to deploy the military to effectively police protests, not just in Los Angeles, because the president's memorandum authorizes the deployment of federal troops anywhere in the country where ICE protests, protests against ICE activity are occurring, regardless of whether they involve any violence or lawbreaking, and also in places where protests have not yet occurred, but where the administration decides that they are likely. And that kind of preemptive nationwide deployment of troops to police protests is unheard of in this country, and it's not authorized by any law that the president might be relying on.
Elizabeth Goitein, we appreciate your insight. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.